Hello, welcome to Blueprints. I'm Bodine Sanders, the producer and host. Joining me today is Shawn Slevin, founder and executive director of Swim Strong Foundation. I'm really excited to have Shawn here today. She's talking about a very important topic. Hello, Shawn, how are you?
Hello, Bodine. I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, no worries. No, we're happy to have you. Happy to have you. Let's get started. The first question I ask all my guests is share your positive perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially based on what you do and where you work.
Well, I think that DEI really provides an opportunity for all of us to learn about each other in very meaningful ways and different ways. It sparks curiosity. It, I think, also sparks creativity and innovation. And certainly, I learned that long before DEI became a focus the way it is today in our business and society. When I was a swimmer myself on my age group competitive swim team and ultimately became a coach because we had 46 languages in our program.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
46 languages. And so we used to do different drills where we would have somebody lead the count in their language. And so we each would learn to count to 10 in that person's language. It was fabulous. And of course, the common language for all of us was the language of the pool, meaning the drills.
And that makes sense. It sounds like it was a lot of fun, an inclusive way of having an activity where people can get engaged and participate. Oh, awesome. So the next question is, what inspired you to create the Swim Strong Foundation?
Bodine, that really resulted in the work that I had done at this age group swim team, which was called the St. Sebastian's swim team, was part of the Catholic Youth Organization in the Brooklyn Queens Diocese in New York City. And I had the blessing of working with more than 8,500 families in 40 years, over a 40-year spread of time. And so in that course of work, I naturally connected with families in a very significant way. And it wasn't just so much about the winning, because we did a lot of that. We were really dominant. We were a powerhouse team. But more importantly, it was about the life lessons that were taught that really transcend the pool. What do I mean by that? So being responsible, first and foremost, to know that you're part of a team. You are required to be at a workout. You are required to be at your competition and to be showing up for that on time, prepared, and with the right headset. Goal setting, personal goal setting. We had listed everybody's times against what were standard competitive times for the age and the gender of those children. And those children knew kind of what the delta was between where they stood at any given moment to those competitive times. And they were working towards being the best swimmer they could be, which doesn't even necessarily mean they make that competitive time. But when you see a child take over 100 seconds off from the beginning of the season to the end of the season across all their strokes, that's a win regardless of their competitiveness or not, right? And then even beyond that, I'll speak particularly teamwork, of course. We all need to work with one another. Doesn't mean we're going to be each other's best buds, but we are here for the team. And that's another piece of this, that we understand that sometimes we're going to be asked to do something that may not be what we particularly might want to do, an event in a meet, for example. But the coach is asking us to do that because that might be one point that we're guaranteed, that we wouldn't be guaranteed otherwise. And so I'm going to do that for the team and not worry about the fact that I might not like swimming that particular stroke. It really doesn't matter. It's for the team. And then perhaps I think the most valuable, as it turns out today, of those life lessons is resiliency. I think I'd like to talk a little bit more about that with you directly. We learned at a very early age that life often will throw hard curveballs at us. And we have to navigate those to find our way out of that in a way that keeps us still healthy, mentally and physically, and productive and able to move on with our lives. So maybe we can touch on that a little bit later.
Absolutely. And I was listening to you closely, and when you're talking about the team concept and that development, that is part of the sports foundation. It doesn't matter if it's swimming, track, football, baseball, soccer, basket, it doesn't matter. All of those important foundational facts, right, is part of what kids learn when they're participating in sports, be it an individual sport, but mostly a team sport. You talked about in a team sport, not all of the athletes are going to be best buds, but they learn to respect each other. Absolutely. Right?
And their competition.
That's part of knowing how to win, right? Nowadays they say act like you've been there before, but it's part of the sportsmanship, right?
Yes.
And so that's why when I tell people, and people ask me about the show, and I tell them, we're focused on DEI, but from a positive perspective, we use sports as the hook, just like my book. And it doesn't matter if it's a CEO or a founder or creator or the executive director. It doesn't matter, because this transfers, what kids learn transfers to becoming an adult. And so it all meets in the intersection of life development. Would you agree?
I would. And I would say, when I speak to it, I generally say that these life skills transcend the pool, right? And they play out in the classroom all the way through the boardroom. They play out in our life in that way. And I've been blessed to have a number of those families that are still in touch with me today, that are helping me with the foundation now. So you just don't realize the seeds that you plant, how the harvest can come to fruition. But over the years, I'm still getting outreaches from my former swimmers who are sharing with me how some of those life lessons have played out for them in different ways. Now, as they're raising their own children, or in their careers, in their volunteer work. And it's so gratifying, Bodine, and humbling to realize that you have had that type of an impact on a child, because it is like the ripple effect. It's not just the child, it's their family, and then it's in the generations to come. And I was also blessed and couldn't have done that without a phenomenal coaching team that worked with me. Because nobody does this alone.
Correct.
Do this in concert with your colleagues, who ultimately, in my case, became dear lifelong friends.
And that's part of the inclusive part of DEI, right? It takes a village, it takes a team, it's not, as I say, it's not a one-way highway, right? Sometimes it's a 3-lane highway, and you're going to need teammates, co-workers, cohorts, partners, right, in order to complete the task and get the job done. So that's a perfect segue into my next question. Let's get a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Let's talk about, unfortunately, why so many, and I know the answer to this because I am obviously an African American, but I know how to swim because I grew up in Florida. But the next question is, why is it so prevalent in the Black and brown community, so many young kids, toddlers and kids, and maybe even some adults drowning? You have the numbers.
I do. And they're not improving, sadly. And yes, there is historical fact for members of the Black and brown community when you look back in our own history here in the United States as it relates to slavery. We find 250 years of a separation of a community that was once highly connected to water. So when you understand that the people that were enslaved came from coastal communities in Africa, where aquatics was part of their culture, they were excellent swimmers. They were pearl divers, right? These were people known for their aquatic skills. The masters, the ship masters, knew that and also realized that they would lose some of their precious cargo because people would try to swim away. And so they began killing them, shooting them to discourage that type of an escape. The plantation owners also knew that. And that continued in terms of shooting people who were trying to escape by using these skills. And so over time and over the generations, remember, you're talking about 250 years or so of slavery. So there's a few generations in there. There was a disenfranchisement of this population from a natural culture and skill that they had to one where they came away from that. Fast forward, we have segregation in the United States in the 50s and 60s until probably the early 70s, and Jim Crow laws, which also separated communities, Black and brown communities from others in certainly in using swimming pools, but other situations, water fountains, on the bus. I mean, pick an example, right? Thank goodness we're beyond that today. I acknowledge the history. I think everybody should. But I also believe very strongly that we can't use the history to continue to keep us away from the opportunities that are in front of us today.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, we don't have those problems. We have access and affordability issues that are the barriers for everybody, not just Black and brown communities, but everybody.
That is correct.
Swimming is a very expensive sport, kind of like tennis in that way. It's expensive. Think about it. It costs a lot of money to build the facility. It costs a lot of money to maintain that facility. It costs a lot of money to staff that facility. So you're already dealing with a lot of cost. Now, how is the developer or whomever's running the facility going to offset those costs? They have to start charging for whatever services that they're providing. So learning how to swim can be very expensive. Typically, it's $1 a minute for a class.
Wow.
Think about that, right? And so that's a big issue for a lot of people, regardless of where they're, coming from, their race or their history. And also, particularly in New York, I'll speak because I'm based in New York City, we have a lack of infrastructure. I call us an aquatic desert. When you think of a population of almost 9 million people, And now we think about our public swimming pools. Our Parks Department has 58 facilities. Only 12 are actually swimming pools.
Wow, that's not enough.
And of those 12, 6 may be available year-round if they're not offline for maintenance or some other, issue that would keep the doors closed. You do the math, Bodine. 9 million people into 6 swimming pools. Yeah. That's just crazy. So the access is huge. And particularly when you think about parents with little ones, it's a lot of work to get together all the stuff you need to get to the pool or the beach or wherever you're going with your child. So if that facility isn't in reasonable access to you, you're not going to go. You're not going to get on the bus and travel for an hour to get to a swimming pool with all, with your kids and all that stuff. It's just not practical, right? To think about what is so easy and accessible, I use basketball as an example. It's so easy to slap a pair of sneakers on your feet and just go down to the corner and shoot some hoops. That's available practically everywhere. Swimming pools, not so much.
And there's a difference between playing with water versus playing in water, right? Playing with water to stay cool, which a lot of folks are doing now because of the heat wave, is different than being in a pool having to be able to swim. And that, I'm telling you, it's so funny. I wrote about this in my book, just a small portion in my book where I talked about how I had to debunk a lot of my teammates who assumed because I was African American, they assumed I couldn't swim. And I'd say, really? Let's go to the pool and let's have a competition. Because my freshman year, I was lucky enough to live in a dorm where there was an indoor pool, an indoor basketball gym, and a cafeteria. That's why it took me a while to get used to Villanova. But that's another topic. But I was able to, not shame, but I was able to gain some respect from some of my teammates and friends. And some of my teammates happened to be Black as well. These weren't just white teammates. They were Black teammates from up north who did not know how to swim. So you know what I did, Shawn? After you and I had a conversation, I talked to my Irish twin sister, who I'm really close with. I have 4 sisters still living. And I asked her, I said, do you know how to swim? And she said, no. And that blew me away. We grew up in the same house. How is it that I knew how to swim and my sisters did not know how to swim? Well, I know why. My uncle did something that most people would not do today. But when we went to what we called the Black Beach, because I grew up in the 60s, we went to a beach called Fernandina Beach because we could not go to Jacksonville Beach. And I wrote about this in the book. But at Fernandina Beach, my uncle literally picked me up, walked me out into the beach ocean, and threw me in and said, swim back. He couldn't do that with his nieces, right? But he could do that with his nephews. And that's how I was able to learn how to swim. But that's just not conducive in today's world.
We would not recommend that. But I hear that often, those experiences of a family member having, thrown me in the deep end and said, sink or swim, baby. It's like, whoa, what trauma. But I think that the real issue is how can we all, because we all can swim. We're all capable of swimming. How do we get that opportunity? Right? That's an ongoing conversation that I hope that we will have, because it plays out in so many other things in our lives, not just the access to the water. But water is coming to us in much more significant ways now as it relates to our environment and climate. At one point, when I used to go and talk to some of the elders in Black churches in various communities in New York City, I would ask, how do you keep your family safe around the water? And inevitably, the response would be, we keep our children away from the water. And at the time, well, I hated the answer. I could understand it. But today, that's no longer even an option because the water is coming to us.
We have to make it just as important as teaching little ones to ride a bicycle.
I say to buckle up when you get into your car.
Sure. It's just that important.
It is that important. Absolutely.
Well, here's the next question. How do we sound the alarm? How do you sound the alarm in order to get people's attention, leaders in the community, be it government, religious, school districts, council men and women, just people in every category? How do you get their attention to say, hey, we've got to come up with a plan to make this mandatory where kids have to learn to swim? Gosh,
I wish it was so easy, right? Sadly, a lot of it is, of course, advocacy. And it seems that that advocacy is heard most when there's a tragedy, which is so disheartening, right?
It's too late. Yeah.
It's too late, of course. When you understand that 95% of drownings are preventable, wow. We need to do better. We must do better, and we can do better. We are the United States of America. We should be leading this challenge. You are not. There is work going on across the country in different states to close those gaps, gratefully, through legislation and other means. But as you can imagine, it's a little bit of a slow go. And also, the reality is that you cannot legislate people's guilt, right?
Right.
So I think of our colleagues in government in particular as so helpful in terms of building infrastructure that can help provide a venue to teach skills, perhaps even funding programs like ours and others, so we can bring the costs down to minimal or no cost at all. But I think the important key is to really understand that we, as individuals, really are our first line of defense. And we need knowledge because it's different today than it was when you and I were children, Bodine.
Mm-hmm.
When we were kids, I'll speak for myself. You will tell me if you agree with this or you had a different experience. But for myself as a kid, I didn't really think about water. After all, I could turn a tap on and I had clean flowing water. I had clean water when I stepped into the bathtub. I had clean water when I went out and I watered my plants. When I went to water, like the ocean or a lake or a pool, it was really for recreational purposes. That was my context. It wasn't until Superstorm Sandy hit us, October 29th through November 2nd, 2012, where I had an epiphany and thought to myself, my gosh, no, it really doesn't matter how swim skilled all of us or any of us are. We can all be overcome and be subject to a drowning situation. All of us. So, having had that aha, I stepped back and I took another look at the drowning statistics. And I saw they hadn't moved for decades. Same miserable, bad numbers. And I thought, well, how are we addressing this issue? Swim lessons. Okay. But put the lens of New York City on that and understand that we have very little access. It's not affordable. Like, a lot of people can't get swim lessons for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent. It's difficult to get swim lessons. So what else can we do to help people that are not going to have that opportunity? And that's where the situational knowledge of water became important to myself personally. And I pulled a team of my colleagues together and we talked about this to say, what other information can we provide to people who may never learn how to swim? How about how they manage risk in, on, or around water? Water in our daily lives, making water more front of mind for us, as opposed to, as I grew up, never really thinking about it at all. Understanding that in our homes, toddlers are drowning at significant rates. It's actually, drowning is the leading cause of death for kids under the age of 5. Mm-hmm. And most of those kids are dying in their own homes. Why? It's because parents and caregivers don't have a context for water. They do for electrical, for example. They know they don't want their little ones putting their finger in the electric socket, so they buy a cover for that socket. But as it relates to water, they don't have the same connectivity. This is low-hanging fruit. There are locks for the toilet bowls. Of course, parental supervision is the key. That is the highest on the list, because all of us have been guilty of it. For just a minute, I'm going to run and answer the door, turn the tea kettle off the stove. Just a minute. But are you aware that all of us, right, can drown in less than 2 minutes and in less than 2 inches of water? And it's silent. So if that child slips under the surface of the water in the bathtub, which is a big issue, we're not going to hear them. Even if we're saying, I'm, tuning my ear to listen to anything, there's nothing to listen to. We just simply cannot leave that child unattended. Full stop. Until they're out of the water. Pick the child up, wrap the child in a towel, take the kid with you.
Right.
And then there's every place else. You go outside your home, every place we need water. Water has different behavior, nature, and danger. So it's different from the pond in your backyard to the little stream in your local pool, your local park, to big rivers, lakes, and of course our ocean, very, very volatile, the most volatile. Then you think about the seasons and how that impacts our water. And then the cherry on top, climate action, and how that is so dramatically impacting us as it relates to water. Well, so that's where all of this came from, thinking about helping people who may never touch water from a swimming point of view, understand that they can survive with this other additional knowledge, broader knowledge.
Well, my understanding, I'll be really quickly because we're coming to the end of the program. My understanding of water is different than yours because I grew up in Florida. Yes. I grew up where there was literally a river down the street. I tell people all the time when I have these type of conversations, instead of me going right, turning right, if I walked out of my family home and going up to the corner store and hanging out, smoking cigarettes, right, and playing video games, I made a left turn and walked down the street with my fishing pole and my crab net and went crabbing. Yes. That was how I entertained myself. And then I got a skateboard and I was really the odd kid in the neighborhood, right? So, but I think with the Olympics coming up and the way that our swim team is getting a lot of publicity, that is another way for us to hope that we can grab and get some more attention towards swimming. So as we wrap up, I want to make sure folks have a way to reach you. If you want to share your phone number or your website, please do so now. Go ahead.
So my email address is Shawn, S-H-A-W-N. Oh, it's coming up on the screen. Super. Shawn.Slevin@swimstrongfoundation.org. And of course, the website, swimstrongfoundation.org. But check out our blogs. We have a lot of different information in there, things that may surprise you, things that I hope inspire you, like our upcoming Olympic swim team. I hope they inspire a lot of people to jump in the water and learn these life-saving skills, because they are just that. And think of this, swimming is the one activity, the only activity that literally we can do from womb to tomb. And it is the best exercise that we can do in our lives.
Well, Shawn, thank you again for being my guest today. We really, really appreciate it. It's a very important topic. Folks, we've come to the end of the program. Thank you for your time. Stay tuned. There's more to come. Have a good one.